Welcome to the Near Memo, a weekly conversation about search, social, and commerce. What happened, why it matters, and the implications for local. All right, so let's move on to me and our final topic today, which is also an AI-related topic. So the idea, there was a discussion on LinkedIn about AI and fake reviews, and how would AI impact sort of the problem of fake reviews, which Google has been stepping up its enforcement efforts against recently. And so what I did, my operating assumption is that people will be generating a lot of fake reviews using AI. And so what I did just to test out that theory is I went to ChatGPT. I said, write a 5-star review for this business : and I input the website. This was my dentist. I input the dentist website, and it turned out a glowing review that referenced dental specifics and sounded very credible, very plausible. And presumably an AI checker would flag that, but I can tell you that the AI text classifier that OpenAI released 2 days ago, I ran a whole bunch of ChatGPT content through it, and it didn't catch most of it. Like, it was uncertain in many cases. Like, it didn't say, yeah, this is 100% AI generated. This was its own tool, and it was not successful in most cases. Mm-hmm. So, I could imagine one of these review farms, offshore somewhere, using these tools to just explode the number of reviews that are available. And
one thing to Google's credit recently is that the new review filter is much more about context than it is about content. And so you'd have to also simultaneously increase your understanding of and place these through VPNs. They'd have to look like they're local. They can't become, there's some of
the folks do that. Some of the companies do that.
Right. It's going to lead to an escalation for sure, combining AI with all of the other tools. But Google is and they're looking at specific categories more than others. They're looking at length of the listing.
So I'd like to go out on a limb and pose a question to the panel, or a reaction. So I would say across the board, every multi-location business we've ever worked with, they cared about the reviews, meaning, are we 5 stars or 4 stars? But they didn't care enough to do anything about them.
Right. They don't respond to them.
It's too many. It's whatever. And I wonder if Google is the same way, because Google, should have solved this problem a long time ago, but review farms are a thing. And maybe Google doesn't even care that much about them, because maybe at a scale, consumers don't really care that much about them. I don't know about you. I rarely read reviews on Google of local businesses. I look at the star rating maybe. If there's a few reviews, and maybe it's a real high consideration thing, like a doctor or a dentist or something, maybe I'll read them. But I wonder if this is a problem. Sure, I think, Greg, you're right. It's going to become like a huge AI-driven farm. And I wonder if that just leads Google to going, screw reviews. Like, we can barely support Google Business Profile stuff without licking about the review stuff.
Do you want me to respond, Mike, or do you want to respond?
The only thing I can respond with is they have gotten more serious in the last 6 months in terms of dealing with these cases, but they don't focus on multi-location, because, as you pointed out, multi-location don't even pay attention. They focus on home services, home construction, real estate, these small businesses that seem to repeatedly violate the terms. And basically what they've done is they've essentially shut those people off for the first 6 months of their listing. And then after that, it's still a struggle. So what they've done is they've targeted these very niche markets to put in place filters. And they're trying to refine those filters. I am personally responsible for training this new AI.
Right.
But it's very targeted. It's not broad-based. It's not across the whole ecosystem. It's against certain types of businesses, certain types of behaviors, certain markets, et cetera.
So that alone says to me they don't really care, right? Because you said, okay, it's like they're using a blunt instrument, turn it off for 6 months. So that's easy, I guess. And then no offense, Mike, but like you're one guy, right, training the AI. I'm sure they have maybe 51 guys training the AI, but
They do. They have all the
yeah,
product experts, which is about 50. They basically drive the process away from their support into the forums where they assume that these are false positives. So anything we give them, they then, I assume, use to
yeah,
refine this on these mostly limited categories, right? So you're right.
yeah,
But they can still turn around and say, hey, we've
Well,
deleted 25% of all reviews. How about that?
you're
right,
inferring that you're the trainers of the AI, which you probably are, but Google hasn't explicitly said that to you.
No, they
Right.
haven't said that, but why else would I be there?
yeah,
Well, because they're, as you said in your article, they're outsourcing support. They're outsourcing
yeah.
support to
But why
people.
would they defer this particular question? Support can't even answer it. They say this is working as intended, but we are allowed to escalate it in the forums.
I
So
I,
that
I
whole
think I,
relationship is strange.
I think Andrew, that you're right. That Google, on one level, doesn't care. I mean, they've been able to hide behind the whole Communications Decency Act, Section 230, which doesn't. There's no liability for any content that appears anywhere on Google, so there are no consequences. The FTC, has made an effort to step up its prosecution or identification and punishment of review fraud, but it can't go after the platforms. I mean, it sort of can, but it doesn't. It can't at this point. So it has to go over individual. It has to go after individual offenders, and it can't. It doesn't have the enforcement firepower to do that. So, we've
But it
got
has
this.
enough nuked reviews now that it can go back to FTC and say, gee, we nuked all these reviews. We're doing a
Well,
good
right.
job.
So Google.
Right.
So that was my other point, is that we've often talked about the Europeans, who have many more regulations now in place than in the U.S. And so the Digital Services Act, and I always, DMA and DSA, Digital Markets Act and Digital Services Act, I believe, services in particular targets fake reviews. You can't have disinformation. You can't have misinformation. Otherwise, you're vulnerable as a platform. So part of Google's stepped up review moderation is an attempt to point to this and say, hey, you pesky Europeans, we're doing something. It's all in good faith. You do have, Curtis Boyd and his company, the Transparency Company, can do this. They can do this at scale. They can detect fake reviews. One of the things they look at is that they look at the review profile, and they look at who the reviewer is, the review source, which seems to me to be a much more effective approach. Although they do look at the text and they look at a whole bunch of stuff, than
I,
looking at the content of the review.
I think it's just it's just I don't want to say it's an insurmountable problem, but it's just going to be a never ending thing. Especially as you pointed out, like now you can generate reviews at scale with AI, and so sure they'll get rid of 25%, and then a billion more reviews will show up tomorrow, right?
Well, the reason that you don't look at reviews anymore, and that I don't look at reviews on Amazon at all. I still look at them occasionally on Google and Yelp and other places. Is because there's so much garbage in there, and you know it, right? And so I think that
Mm-hmm.
this is starting to permeate the broader consumer landscape. Is that people are conscious of review fraud. They don't know exactly how pervasive it is. They don't know. They can't recognize it in the moment, but they know it's there, and so they're looking at multiple sites trying to see consensus, or they're disregarding reviews entirely, which is why younger people in part are going to TikTok to get things like restaurant recommendations, because there's a human there. They can see the interior, and the review world has become so polluted that it's unreliable. It's now just a sort of a directional indicator in a way that you can't rely
Yeah.
on.
I actually think, like when it comes to Google business profiles, um, photos and videos are much more helpful for almost any type of
Well,
business.
that's the TikTok rationale, exactly.
Yeah, like I want to see the inside of the restaurant. I want to see the jobs the pest control guy has worked on, right?
Well, and in
But
fact,
because
in the Google, I think it was the Search On event, whenever that happened in the fall, they were talking about all these. It was a lot of local stuff, maps and local and AR, and they started talking about all these other things that you could get out of the Google Business Profile to help you learn about a business. They were talking about Vibe. They were talking about non-reviews. It was very subtle. It was very subtle, but I felt like they were really downplaying reviews and trying to play up other things that were competitive with sites like TikTok and Instagram, where you were going to get the visual information. You were going to get all this other non-textual information to help, to appeal to younger users who want.
Yeah.
I think you can see this in the interface where reviews are only presented in summary at totals, and it's multiple clicks to get into a review, and particularly to see a bad review. It's very deeply buried in the interface. So I assume that's part and parcel of the same project.
Well, and mobile users, where a lot of the action is, there's no way to like read a bunch of reviews. I mean, at best, you read one or two of the most recent reviews. You look at the star rating, and sort of hope for the best.
I think what you want is like their AI thing when they come out with it is it'll just tell me. It's like, hey, Andrew, I know you. This place isn't for you. Move on. Like, keep scrolling. Like, that's what I want.
That's back to the hot pot days, Andrew, from 2010.
Well, so there was a guy. The guy, I'm blanking on his name. He rose up in the ranks. It's embarrassing to me that I can't remember his name. There was a guy who was one of their. He sort of became one of their analytics gurus ultimately, and I think he's gone from Google now, but I don't remember. But he created a local application that they were calling for a time Alfred, as in Batman's butler. Mm-hmm. And there were a couple of names. And I talked to him before it got acquired by Google. It was like an acqui-hire thing. And what they were going to do was they were going to create, this was a really interesting idea, Pandora for the real world. So, places.
That's not a good thing.
Well, I thought it was very interesting. Well, this is the VC pitch deck speak,
right.
but
it's called monkeypox.
Well, the idea was that they were identifying similar places that had similar characteristics, and that was
Pandora, the music app. I thought you meant Pandora, the Greek myth where pestilence was let loose on the world.
No, that was, yes, you're more learned than I. No, I was talking about Pandora, the radio.
I got it.
Yeah, as opposed to Pandora, the fictional world in the movie Avatar,
that's right.
The planet or whatever it is. Anyway, it was really an interesting idea that they were going to try and identify places that were similar in the world and tie those to your tastes and make recommendations to you. And it never came to fruition because Google snapped it out of the vaporware world. I mean, it wasn't vaporware before it had a chance really to launch. Mm-hmm. But
I think yes. Most of this stuff is gonna for local businesses is gonna remain in the realm of there's a problem. It may not really be a problem, but it drives me crazy because there's a bad review. Can someone fix that? Like that's what it's gonna be.
Yes. Okay. And on that helpful and optimistic note, we come to the end of another exciting episode. Thank you, Andrew Shotland, for joining us. As always, subscribe to our newsletter, tell your friends about our podcast and our newsletter. And Andrew, anything you want to say?
I just want to thank you both.
Yes,
both for selflessly giving your all every week. Really, we see you and we appreciate it.
Yeah, that sounds like sarcasm to me, Andrew.
No, that's heartfelt. Okay. That's AI.
With Andrew, you never can tell the difference. That's the problem.
Yeah, now everything I write is now generated by AI. I'm just slapping my byline on it. So
yeah.
Somebody needs to create an AI with a kind of snark dial that you can dial up or dial down.
We were trying with my daughter last night. We were like running some queries through ChatGPT on I forgot some geometry thing or something, and we started like, well, what if we had to figure this out during a zombie apocalypse? And actually, ChatGPT got a little snarky.
Oh, that's good. All right.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll see you next week. As always, have a good week wherever you are in the world, wherever you're listening to this. And thanks for listening.
Thanks for joining David, Mike, and Greg. To stay on top of the latest developments in local, subscribe to our newsletter at nearmedia.co. We'll see you next week.